Captain Myra Santos guided her freighter into the bustling environs of Colony Station, feeling a familiar mix of relief and weariness. She had spent weeks charting trade routes among uninhabited systems, her crew content to rest while she handled the paperwork. Yet today's delivery was different. Waiting at the docking bay was a lone figure, tall, slender, and draped in a tattered cloak of deep violet. The refugee's luminous green eyes watched every human who passed, daring them to come closer. Mira felt a flutter of curiosity. She wondered what story lay beneath those iridescent scales. As the unloading crew approached, the alien stiffened. She crossed her arms over her chest and glared, as if daring anyone to touch her. Mira observed from a distance, noting the tightness of her shoulders and the way her slender fingers flexed into claws. It was clear this refugee had faced horrors. No one spoke the refugee's language, and the station's translator still struggled with her dialect. The result was tense. Silence and unspoken divide forming between one wounded soul and 100 well-meaning strangers. Mira stepped forward, her boots clicking against the metal walkway. She kept her hands visible and her voice calm as she greeted. "The refugee in basic? I'm Captain Santos," she said softly. The alien's posture softened for a moment, and her eyes flickered with something that looked like hope. But the moment passed. She straightened again, lips parting in a growl. That spoke of raw fear. Mira realized that trust would have to be earned, one gentle gesture at a time. Later, Mira led the alien to the small quarters at the end of the cargo bay. She watched as the refugee eyed the cot and the sparse furnishings with suspicion. Activated the small ambient lights, casting a warm glow that reminded the alien of starlit skies. When she offered a cup of tea, the refugee recoiled, hissing softly. Mira let the cup hover at arm's length, giving her space. Over the next hour, she sat in silence, her own cup of tea steaming at her side. She imagined how it felt to be alone. On a foreign station, surrounded by strange faces and unfamiliar words, as the artificial sun dipped below the station's viewports. Casting rosy hues across the room, Mira finally spoke again. She shared a story of her own childhood on a watery colony world, where rain fell almost every day and neighbors greeted strangers with open arms. She spoke slowly and simply, choosing words that might translate. The alien's rigid stance softened, and she tilted her head, absorbing each new sound. Mira carefully extended her hand, fingers outstretched in invitation. The refugee hesitated, then touched Mira's fingertips with one slender claw. The contact was slight, yet warm enough to thaw a bit of the alien's frozen guard. That night, as the station hummed with life beyond the reinforced doors, Mira felt a shift in the air. The refugee no longer paced or bared her teeth at every passerby. Instead, she sat quietly in Myra's presence, her luminous eyes reflecting the soft light. Myra placed a small, weathered photograph on the tabbouleh memory of her younger sister, laughing in a field of yellow flowers. The refugee leaned forward, eyes narrowing in curiosity. Mira offered the photo with a gentle nod, and though the alien did not touch it, she studied it as if seeking something she had lost. Mira closed her eyes briefly, smiling inwardly. It was only the first act of a longer journey, and she could sense the refugee's pain beneath the hostility. But she also sensed something else: resilience. Mira resolved to unlock the walls around this alien heart, one compassionate moment at a time. As she left the quarters to rest, she glimpsed the refugee once more, staring at a blank holoscreen. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Yet for the first time, neither of them felt entirely alone in the vastness of space. In the soft glow of the small cargo bay quarters, the refugee sat curled on the edge of the metal cot, knees drawn to her chest and arms wrapped protectively around them. Her iridescent skin caught the light in violet and teal ripples, and every breath she took showed tension. Mira Santos watched from the foot of the bed, her heart aching at the sight of such wounded pride. She knew that fear makes even the gentlest creatures lash out, and she was determined to show kindness, no matter how many times she was rejected. Mira rose and moved to the small galley area, where she quietly prepared a simple meal, steaming. Bowls of soft spiced porridge and small platters of crisp fruit slices. She remembered how her own crew had welcomed her with familiar tastes when she first returned from a long mission. Carrying the meal on a tray, she knelt beside the cot and set it down a respectful distance away. The refugee's glowing eyes snapped open, darting to the food. She frowned, as if offended by the offer, but hunger tugged at her thin frame. Betrayed days without proper sustenance, slowly, without making eye contact. The refugee reached out a trembling hand to touch a fruit slice. Mira smiled gently and spoke in the lowest tones of basic, hoping the soft cadence would feel safe. "This is sweet paw fruit," she said. "It helped me when I felt lost, too." The refugee paused, then bit into the fruit. Her stiff posture softened as she chewed, eyes unfocusing for a moment in quiet relief. Mira sat back and allowed her silence to speak volumes. In that hush, the gap between human and alien felt a little smaller. Over the next hour, Mira brought simple comforts warm. Blankets, a soft pillow, and set them within reach. Each gesture was small, but they piled up like stones across a chasm. The refugee did not speak, but she did not push the items away. Last, the air between them held possibility instead of electric tension. Mira settled into a chair across the room and allowed herself to breathe more freely. She studied the alien's face, the fine ridges above her cheekbones, the gentle curve of her jaw, the single silver band around her wrist that Mira guessed was a memory token. Then something unexpected happened. The refugee lifted the band and traced the worn patterns with a clawed fingertip. The light caught on tiny scratches, and tears formed in her eyes. Mira realized this token must hold a story, perhaps of the child she had lost. She gently tapped her own chest and spoke. "I lost my sister once, too." The alien's head lifted, and for the first time she met Mira's gaze. There was pain there, but also curiosity. Mira's heart swelled with warmth at this unspoken connection as the hours passed. The refugee finally permitted Mira to sit closer. Mira pulled her chair within an arm's reach, careful not to crowd the other. She opened her datapad and activated a soft recording of falling rain that sounded like the gentle storms on Mira's homeworld. The alien closed her eyes, listening. The falling water soothed something deep inside her, and a soft breath escaped her lips, as if she were exhaling years of sorrow. When the rain recording ended, the refugee reached out and pressed a clawed hand against the datapad's smooth surface. She tapped one button, and suddenly a second recording played. The soft cry of an infant, fragile and urgent. Mira's breath caught. She recognized the pattern of a child's wail. She watched the alien's posture relax, shoulders dropping as if a weight had lifted. The alien's voice, crackling through the translator, whispered one word, "Leia." Mira's eyes widened. "Leia," she repeated gently. The refugee nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. Mira placed a steady hand over her own heart and said, "I will help you find Leia." In that promise, the refugee's hostility melted away entirely. For the first time, she offered Mira a genuine, grateful smile. It was small and hesitant, but it shone with hope. Mira realized that the greatest journeys begin with trust, born from simple acts of compassion. As she settled in for the night, she felt certain that tomorrow they would follow this new thread together and that neither of them would face the darkness alone. In the pale glow of early station morning, Ira led the refugee through the winding corridors toward the archives wing. The air smelled faintly of old paper and recycled air. The refugee's steps were light but hesitant, her cloak brushing the metal floor. Myra offered her arm an unspoken promise of protection, and the alien accepted. Clutching the fabric with trembling fingers, each turn felt like a journey through memory's labyrinth. They passed stacks of holophiles and quiet offices where clerks sorted data. Mira could sense the refugee's heart pounding, a mix of fear and hope. She spoke softly and basic. "We are close. I can feel it." The refugee nodded, eyes shining with cautious trust. Inside the archives chamber, Mira presented the refugee's token, the silver wristband, to the station officer. He examined it through a magnifier, noting the faint inscription in an alien script. After a moment's pause, he activated a holoscreen and began cross-referencing registry records. The refugee watched the scrolling names with clenched claws, her tail flicking in anxious rhythm. Myra stood at her side, offering silent encouragement. When the officer paused, pointing to a single entry, Myra's heart leaped. The name matched. The token, Leia Saren. The screen displayed a small hollow portrait of a child with wide eyes and dark curls, nearly identical to the tear-streaked face of the refugee's memories. A gasp escaped the refugee's lips. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against the glass as if to feel the presence of her child. Mira placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "She is here," Mira said. "She is safe." The refugee's shoulders collapsed and she wept quietly. Mira guided her to a nearby bench. They sat together, two souls bound by love and loss, while the officer arranged the release papers. The refugee whispered her gratitude, voice trembling. "Thank you," Mira replied, voice steady. "We will bring her to you."
Right.
With the paperwork complete, Myra led the refugee to the Family Reunification Center, a bright hall filled with families embracing after long separations. The refugee's steps faltered at the entrance, her breath catching at each sound of laughter and tears. Mira stayed close, murmuring, "You are not alone now." They reached a closed chamber where waiting families watched through tinted glass. Inside, a young girl, small, frightened, and alone stood by a wall, clutching a battered stuffed creature. Her eyes were wide, searching every face. At that moment, the refugee's rigid posture melted away. She reached out and pressed her hand against the glass. The child looked up, frozen in place, then ran forward and placed her palm against the other side. Meeting the refugee's touch, the glass between them glowed softly as the reunion sequence began. The chamber door slid open, and the little girl ran into her mother's arms. The refugee dropped to her knees, tears flowing freely as she held her child close. Mira stepped back, letting them have this precious moment. The child buried her face in her mother's cloak and squeezed tight. Other families paused and watched in respectful silence, moved by this silent bond that spanned worlds. Mira felt warmth bloom in her chest, proud that her simple acts had led to this miracle. As the crowd dispersed, the refugee and her daughter walked toward Mira. The child reached out and took Mira's hand, bright smile lighting her face. The refugee's eyes brimmed with gratitude. She spoke in broken basic, "You saved us both." Mira knelt so she could look into their eyes. She replied, "You saved yourselves," with courage. In their shared silence, Mira understood that hope is strongest when hearts unite across all differences. As they walked back to the freighter, mother and daughter side by side, Mira marveled at how a hostile stranger had become family. Their journey was not over, but together they would face whatever lay ahead, bound by a love that transcended the stars. Mira guided the refugee and her daughter back toward the freighter, their footsteps echoing through the station's halls. The little girl, whose name was Leia, clutched her mother's cloak. She glanced at every passerby with wide, cautious eyes. The refugee held Leia's hand firmly, never letting go. Mira kept pace beside them, smiling gently. Though the station was crowded for this small family, the world had narrowed to each other's presence. As they stepped into the freighter's airlock, the refugee paused. She looked at the familiar metal walls and soft light of Myra's quarters. Leia peeked around her mother's leg, eyes curious but shy. Mira knelt and greeted Leia in basic. "Welcome home," she said. The girl blinked, then offered a small nod. The refugee exhaled slowly, relief shining in her luminous eyes. Together, they passed through the airlock into the quiet warmth of the ship. Inside the cabin, Mira had prepared a safe corner with soft mats and pillows. She had placed a small basket of toys from the station's children's wing. Smooth wooden puzzles, plush creatures, and colorful blocks. Leia's face lit up when she saw them. She ran forward, dropping to her knees to examine each toy. Her mother watched with wonder as tears of joy drifted down her cheeks. Mira stood back, letting this new family discover peace in their private haven. After Leia settled with the toys, Mira offered the refugee a seat and a cup of warm tea. The refugee accepted, her silver band reflecting the light. She cradled the cup with both hands, inhaling the fragrant steam. Mira sat beside her, careful not to crowd. "You both need rest," she said softly. "You have been through so much." The refugee nodded, her shoulders relaxing. She dared to smile. It was the first genuine smile Myra had seen on her face. As evening approached, the freighter's soft lights shifted into a calm blue. Leia had grown more comfortable, exploring the cabin with quick, curious steps. She climbed onto the bunk and peered out the viewport at the swirling stars. Mira joined her and pointed to distant constellations, telling simple stories of brave explorers. Leia listened, her doubts receding with every word. The refugee watched from below, her heart warmed by the sight of her daughter at ease. Later, Mira retrieved a small data plate from her desk. It held recorded lessons on human language and customs. She offered it to the refugee. "This may help," she said. The refugee took it, studying the icons. Slowly, she tapped one, and a soft voice spoke basic phrases. Mira encouraged her. "Repeat after me." The refugee practiced simple words. "Hello. Thank you, friend." Each success made her smile. Leia clapped her hands, proud of her mother's courage. That night, Mira adjusted the cabin's gravity dimmer to a low setting and invited them to rest. She laid fresh blankets on the lower bunk for the refugee and Leia. "Sleep now," she whispered. The refugee tucked Leia in, brushing her daughter's dark curls aside. She kissed Leia's forehead, then gathered her own cloak as a blanket. Mira dimmed the lights further, leaving just enough glow to remind them of distant stars. Before leaving, Mira placed a soft hand on the refugee's shoulder. "Tomorrow," Mira said, "we will set course for your homeworld's space lane. I will help you find a new place to live, a community to join." The refugee's eyes glistened with hope. She clasped Mira's hand silently, a wordless promise of trust. Mira nodded and touched her heart, returning the gesture.
What? In that moment?
They were equals to protectors bound by friendship. As Myra closed the cabin door, she paused to look back. Through the small window, she saw the refugee and Leia curled together, breathing softly in their shared cocoon of safety. Mira felt a gentle pride. She had brought home a hostile stranger, and now she had helped reunite a mother and child.
Oh.
Freighter hummed around her, a ship once used for trade, now a vessel of hope. Myra smiled, knowing their journey was only beginning. Mira set the freighter's course toward the Lorani expanse, the trade lanes that curved past the refugee's home world. In the cockpit, she guided the ship through streaks of starlight, while below, mother and daughter rested.
All the soft hum
of the engines was a lullaby that carried them closer to hope. Mira glanced at the status monitors. Shields and engines stable, life support optimal. Everything was as it should be. Yet her thoughts were on the refugee whom she now called Saranand, little Leia. They had come so far together, and the next stretch of their journey would test their bond in new ways. Down in the cabin, Saran woke to the gentle vibration of the ship's engines. She rose, careful not to wake Leia, and wandered to the viewport. The stars outside shifted in silent patterns, and she traced them with her fingertip against the glass. Myra entered quietly, holding 2 steaming cups of herbal tea. She offered one to Saran, who accepted it with a grateful nod. They drank in companionable silence, sharing warmth without words. Saran's eyes shone with tears as she remembered the darkness she had known, lost worlds, empty cradles, and cold isolation. Now in this small ship she felt something she hardly dared name. Safety. Mira spoke softly. "You are safe now. We're almost to your space lane." Saran's lips curved in a hesitant smile. She clasped the cup with both hands, drawing strength from the warmth. Below them, Leia stirred and rubbed her eyes. Mira scooped the child into her arms and carried her to join them by the viewport. Leia blinked at the sea of stars, then pointed with wonder. Mira explained each constellation in simple terms, that one is the traveler's path. It guides. Lost ship's home. Leia's eyes widened as she imagined the path lighting the way for her and her mother. Later, Mira brought out a holomap of the Lorani expanse. The bright corridors marked safe routes. The dark swaths warned of uncharted nebulae. Saren's slender fingers hovered over her home system, a tiny blue dot at the map's edge. Mira tapped the dot and said, "Here, I will drop you at the nearest way station." Saren's shoulders relaxed for the first time in days. She looked at Myra, gratitude shining in her eyes, and spoke one broken phrase in Basic. "Thank you, friend." Myra smiled and replied, "You are family." As the freighter slipped into the outer boundary of the expanse, the sensors beeped. A drifting convoy of derelict ships blocked their path. Their hulls were scarred, waves of corrosion rippling across once shiny metal. Mira frowned. These ships were victims of cosmic storm's electrical discharges that shredded unshielded vessels. If the freighter passed too close, its own shields could falter. She adjusted the thrusters, angling the ship around the convoy. Saren watched from the viewport, her fingers tightening around the rail. Leia clung to her mother, face pale. Mira steadied their hands, guiding them to a secure viewing port. "It's okay," she whispered. "We will pass safely." Mira's deft maneuvers carried them clear of danger. The trio watched the battered hulls drift away into the darkness. Saren exhaled, relief flooding her features. Leia reached up and hugged her mother's leg tightly. Mira felt her heart swell. Even amid shattered wrecks and drifting shadows, life persisted. They pressed onward, deeper into the glowing lanes of the expanse. That evening, Mira prepared a simple meal of rehydrated stew and fresh bread from the station supplies. They gathered around the small table in the cabin, each with their own cup and bowl. Leia ate with gusto, her hunger restored by the safety of the ship. Soren ate slowly, savoring each bite, and Mira watched them with contentment. After the meal, Saren brought out the silver band she wore, the token from her lost homeworld, and placed it on the table between them. Mira reverently touched the engraving, feeling its history of love and loss. Saren's eyes glimmered as she spoke in her own language, then in broken Basic memory. Mira nodded and said, "Keep your memories alive. They guide you." As the freighter sailed through the star-strewn corridor, Saren and Leia settled into the cabin's corner, sharing quiet laughter over wooden puzzles. Mira watched them, pride warming her chest. She plotted the next jump on the holomap, marking coordinates for the way station.
8.
She would ensure Saren had enough supplies and allies waiting. Then she would return to her trade routes, her ship, ringing with new purpose. That night, Mira rested in her cabin, dreaming of distant horizons. In her mind, she replayed the sound of Leia's laughter and Saren's first genuine smile. She knew their stories were intertwined now, bound by compassion and courage. Tomorrow, they would reach the way station and face new challenges, but together. They carried enough hope to light the darkness of any unknown. Saren stood on the landing pad of the Lorani way station, cradling Leia in her arms as the freighter's ramp retracted behind them. The station was alive with activity. Traders unloaded cargo, families reunited, and children chased glowing orbs that floated like friendly fireflies. Saren's heart pounded as she stepped forward, each footfall echoing her hope. Leia peeked over her mother's shoulder, eyes wide with excitement at the strange new world. Mira stayed at the top of the ramp, watching them with a proud smile. In a soft wave, a friendly station attendant approached, bowing politely and offering them a data chip. "Welcome," she said in gentle Basic. "We have prepared quarters for you." Serene accepted the chip with trembling fingers, tracing the etched lines that mapped their new home. Mira knelt and ruffled Leia's hair. "They are good people here," she said. Seren nodded, her throat tight with gratitude. The attendant led them down a curved corridor lined with plants that glowed blue under soft lights, giving the hall a magical feel. Inside the modest suite, Saren placed Leia on a low cot covered in warm linens. The child hugged a plush creature from the station's welcome pack and smiled at her mother. Seren set the data chip in a small console by the door. Immediately, a holographic map of the station sprang to life, showing markets, gardens, and learning centers, Saren's eyes filled with tears. This was more than she had dared dream. She turned to Mira, whose own eyes glistened. They embraced in a silent promise of ongoing friendship. Later, Mira joined Saren and Leia in the communal garden dome. Bioluminescent vines curled over curved benches, and a gentle mist carried the scent of alien blossoms. Leia reached out to touch a flower that glowed soft pink, giggling when its petals tickled her fingers. Saren knelt beside her daughter, laughter spilling from her lips as she watched Leia's joy. Mira watched too, her heart warming at the sight of a mother's pure happiness. It was the moment she had worked toward, a simple scene of peace. After they wandered the garden, Mira guided them to a small schoolroom where language tutors gathered. Saren settled into a seat at a round table. Leia perched on her lap. A kind tutor offered them voice lessons on a portable holopad. The tutor spoke basic phrases slowly and clearly, then encouraged Saran to repeat them. At first, Saran stumbled, her accent foreign, her tongue unfamiliar with new sounds. But with each attempt, she grew more confident, her words smoothing into clear, simple sentences. Leia clapped when her mother said, "Good morning, friend," perfectly. As the sun-simulated lights dimmed for the station's evening cycle, Saren and Myra shared a quiet meal in the station's dining hall. They sat at a table lined with warm bread, roasted vegetables, and a sweet fruit drink unique to the Lorani. System, Leia nibbled happily, her laughter soft and content. Serene raised her glass to Mira and said in clear basic, "Thank you for bringing us here." Mira smiled and replied, "You brought me here too. I have learned more from you than, you know." Their eyes met, and in that glance lay a bond stronger than any distance. That night, Mira prepared to depart. She packed her gear and checked her ship systems via hololink. Saren and Leia came to the airlock to see her off. Leia handed Mira a small wooden puzzle they had built together, a gift of friendship. Saren clasped Mira's hands and said, "You are always welcome here." Mira's throat caught. She pulled Saren and Leia into a gentle hug, careful not to jostle the child. "I will return," she promised, "and I will bring news of more who need help." Saren nodded, hope and trust shining in her eyes. When the freighter lifted off, Saren and Leia watched through the observation dome until the ship was a distant speck among stars. Then Saren took Leia's hand and led her back to the suite. As they walked, Saren thought of all that had changed, from fear and loss to home and family. She smiled, knowing this was only the beginning of their new life. In Leia's bright laughter and the safety of the way station, Saren felt her heart grow full. And somewhere among the stars, Mira Santos steered her ship onward, carrying the light of compassion to the next lost soul in need. Months later, the freighter descended toward the Lorani way station under a soft lavender sky. Mira Santos guided her ship into the landing bay with practiced skill. Her heart fluttered as she remembered the first time she had met Saren and Leia, hostile and afraid, and hopeful and brave. Now, she carried gifts and news of new friendships formed in distant colonies. She hoped their reunion would be as warm as it had been before. When the cargo ramp lowered, Myra spotted Saren waiting by a cluster of blue glowing plants. The refugees, eyes once full of fear, now shone with confidence. Leia stood at her mother's side, clutching a bright ribbon that Mira had given her months ago. The child ran forward, laughter ringing like bells, and Mira crouched to catch her in a gentle hug. Leia's small arms squeezed tight as if she never wanted to let go. Saren approached with tears of joy glistening on her skin's iridescent scales. She held out a delicate crystal orb, engraved with star patterns from her world. "For you," she said in clear basic. "Thank you for giving us a home and a future." Mira accepted the gift, her own eyes misting. She placed it carefully among the star charts in her cabin, knowing it would guide her in dark times. They walked together through the station's market district, where traders from many worlds sold glowing fruits and woven fabrics. Saren greeted familiar faces, her broken English now fluent and warm. Leia waved at stallkeepers who had welcomed her months before. Mira watched, feeling pride and wonder that one act of kindness could ripple across the galaxy so strongly. Later, at the communal garden dome, The three sat on a smooth stone bench beneath vines that glowed like soft lanterns. Leia played at their feet with a small wooden toy ship, pretending to pilot across the stars. Saren placed her hand on Mira's shoulder and said, "You gave us hope. We grow strong because of you." Mira smiled and touched Saren's hand in return. "You gave me purpose," she replied. "Watching you both flourish has been my greatest reward." As evening lights dimmed, they gathered in the station's meeting hall for a small celebration. Friends and neighbors from many species offered food and songs of welcome. Saren stood in front of the crowd, her voice steady and clear, sharing her story of loss and reunion. Leia stood by her side, holding her mother's hand. Mira listened, her heart full, as the audience applauded not only their journey, but the compassion that made it possible. After the celebration, they returned to Mira's ship for a private dinner. Mira prepared a simple meal of spiced lentil stew and sweet fruit compote. They ate under the soft glow of the cockpit's overhead lights, sharing memories and laughter. Leia recounted the games she had played at school, while Saren described her new work as a language tutor at the station's learning center. Mira listened, marveling at how far they had come. Before bedtime, Saren and Leia presented Mira with a small book of drawings, each page illustrated with scenes of their travels together, meeting in the cargo bay, the reunion in the holochamber, and the journey through the Lorani expanse. Mira turned each page slowly, tears of joy filling her eyes. "I will carry this always," she whispered. "No matter where I go, I will remember our time together." That night, as Mira lay in her bunk, the crystal orb by her side and the drawing book on her lap, she felt a deep peace. She knew her life's purpose was to reach out to strangers, offer hope, and build new families in the cold expanse of space. Tomorrow, she would return to trade routes, but her path would always lead her back to friends like Saren and Leia. In the vast galaxy, a single act of kindness can spark a legacy of compassion that shines brighter than any star.